The rattling sound of the approaching stagecoach echoed through the dusty streets of Oroville, California, as Thomas Benson anxiously shifted his weight from one foot to another, squinting against the late afternoon sun of 1876. He'd been waiting for this moment for months, ever since he'd placed the advertisement for a bride in the Eastern newspaper, desperate for companionship in his lonely existence as a cattle rancher. The stagecoach finally rolled to a stop, dust billowing around its wheels. Thomas straightened his vest and smoothed down his freshly trimmed beard. He wasn't much to look at, 30 years old, with sun-weathered skin, calloused hands, and clothes that had seen better days, but he'd prepared as best he could for this meeting. The driver hopped down and opened the door. First came an elderly couple, then a traveling salesman. Thomas held his breath as the last passenger appeared, a young woman in a modest blue traveling dress. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a small hat, her face pale but pretty with delicate features and wide, apprehensive green eyes. She was exactly as she described herself in her letters, except for one detail she had failed to mention. As she carefully descended from the coach, Thomas noticed her uneven gait, a pronounced limp that caused her to grip the door frame tightly. The driver retrieved her single trunk, and she thanked him softly before turning to scan the waiting crowd. Thomas stepped forward, removing his hat. "Miss Amelia Zimmerman." Relief flooded her features. "Mr. Benson, Thomas Benson." "Yes, madam." He nodded, trying not to stare at her leg as she took another tentative step forward. "It's mighty fine to meet you in person." Uncertainty flashed across her face. "I suppose I should have mentioned." She gestured vaguely toward her leg, her cheeks flushing pink with embarrassment. Thomas realized she was waiting for his reaction, perhaps expecting disappointment or rejection. Instead, he offered his arm and spoke the words that would change both their lives forever. "I'll walk slow beside you always, Miss Zimmerman. If you'll have me, that is." Her eyes widened, and for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, she smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her entire face. "Thank you, Mr. Benson. I believe I would like that very much." Amelia had traveled for 6 days from Philadelphia to reach Oroville. The journey had been grueling, with each bump and jolt of the stagecoach sending pain shooting through her damaged leg. Born with a normal gait, it had been a childhood illness at 12 years old that had left her with a permanent limp. The muscles in her left leg weakened and slightly twisted. In Philadelphia, she had been the unmarried daughter of a respectable merchant, pitied by neighbors and considered unlikely to ever wed. At 22, she had begun to believe them until she saw Thomas's advertisement seeking a kind-hearted, educated lady willing to share the life of a hard-working rancher in California. She'd written to him immediately, describing her skills as a bookkeeper, her love of reading, her experience running her father's household after her mother's death, but she hadn't mentioned her limp. It wasn't a deliberate omission at first, but as their correspondence continued over months, it became increasingly difficult to introduce the subject. "I've arranged for you to stay at Mrs. Fleming's boarding house until—" Thomas cleared his throat awkwardly as they walked slowly down Oroville's Main Street. "Well, until we decide if we suit each other. I know you've come a long way, but I wouldn't want you to feel rushed into marriage." Amelia nodded gratefully. "That's very considerate, Mr. Benson." "Please call me Thomas." "Thomas," she repeated, testing the name. "And I'm Amelia." Thomas carried her trunk with one hand while offering his other arm for support. He matched his pace to hers, never showing impatience when she needed to pause or take an uneven step. They passed the general store, the blacksmith shop, and the Silver Dollar Saloon where several men lounged on the porch. "Well, would you look at that?" one of them called out. Benson finally got his mail-order bride. Thomas's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "Seems damaged goods to me," another man muttered, just loud enough to be heard. Amelia felt Thomas stiffen beside her. Before he could speak, she squeezed his arm gently. "It's all right," she whispered. "I've heard worse." But Thomas wasn't willing to let it pass. He stopped walking and turned toward the men. "Miss Zimmerman has traveled nearly 2,000 miles to be here. She's tired and deserves a proper welcome to Oroville. I'd appreciate it if you'd show her the respect she's due." The men exchanged glances, somewhat chastened by Thomas's calm but firm words. The older of the two tipped his hat. "No offense meant, madam. Welcome to Oroville." Amelia nodded in acknowledgement, and they continued down the street. "I'm sorry about that," Thomas said quietly. "You needn't apologize for others." She paused, then added, "But thank you for defending me. Not many would." They reached Mrs. Fleming's 2-story boarding house at the end of the street. The kindly widow welcomed Amelia warmly, showing no reaction to her limp, and led her to a small but comfortable room on the first floor. "I'll call for you tomorrow morning, if that's all right," Thomas said as he set down her trunk. "Perhaps I could show you around town." "I'd like that very much." After he left, Amelia sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion washing over her. She massaged her aching leg, wondering if she had made the right decision in coming here. Thomas seemed kind, just as he had in his letters, but would that kindness last? Or would he eventually grow impatient with her limitations, with the way she slowed him down? She unpacked her few belongings and found the small daguerreotype of her parents. Her father had died just last year, leaving her alone in the world. The modest inheritance hadn't been enough to sustain her indefinitely, and the thought of becoming a burden to distant relatives had been unbearable. "I've made the right choice," she whispered to herself. "I must have faith." Thomas rode back to his ranch that evening with his mind full of Amelia. She was even prettier than he'd imagined from her descriptions, with an inner strength that showed in the determined set of her jaw. Her limp had surprised him, yes, but what had surprised him more was his own immediate acceptance of it. His ranch was 5 miles outside of town, not large by California standards, but respectable, with 100 head of cattle and good grazing land. The house was simple but solid, built by his own hands over the past 5 years. He'd added a second bedroom last year, hoping someday it would be filled with children. As he stabled his horse and went about his evening chores, he thought about Amelia's face when he'd said he'd walk slowly beside her. The relief, the hope, the caution, all had been visible in those expressive green eyes. He'd meant what he said. Thomas Benson was not a man who made promises lightly. The next morning, Thomas arrived at the boarding house precisely at 9. He'd spent extra time on his appearance, wearing his best shirt and the bolo tie his father had given him years ago. Amelia was waiting in the parlor, dressed in a pretty green dress that matched her eyes. Her hair was arranged in a simple but elegant style, with soft tendrils framing her face. "Good morning," he said, suddenly feeling tongue-tied. In their letters, conversation had flowed easily between them, but face-to-face was different. "Good morning, Thomas." She smiled, and just like that, his nervousness began to fade. They walked slowly through town, Thomas pointing out the various buildings and introducing her to people they met. Most were welcoming, though Amelia was acutely aware of the curious glances at her uneven gait. "What do you think of Oroville so far?" Thomas asked as they paused outside the general store. "It's lovely. So different from Philadelphia, more open somehow, like there's room to breathe." Thomas nodded. "That's what I love about it. When I first came west after the war, I couldn't bear the thought of being hemmed in by buildings and people." "You fought in the war?" Amelia asked softly. Yes, for the union. I don't talk about it much. She nodded, understanding. My brother Daniel fought too. He didn't come home. Thomas's expression softened. I'm sorry, Amelia. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, my letters. I wasn't entirely forthcoming about my leg. Thomas waited patiently as she gathered her thoughts. I had scarlet fever when I was 12. It damaged the muscles in my left leg. The doctors said I was lucky. Many children don't survive such a high fever, but afterward I couldn't walk properly anymore. She looked at him directly. I should have told you. Why didn't you? His tone held no accusation, only curiosity. I was afraid you wouldn't want me if you knew. Most men wouldn't. And then, as our correspondence continued, it became harder to mention it. I told myself I would explain in person, but I was a coward. Her voice trembled slightly. If you wish to end our arrangement, I understand completely. Thomas considered her words carefully before responding. Amelia, I value honesty. And yes, I wish you'd told me, if only so I could have better prepared for your arrival, perhaps arranged for a buggy to meet you instead of making you walk through town. She looked down, ashamed. But, he continued gently, I understand why you didn't. Fear makes us do things we later regret. Are you disappointed? She asked, unable to meet his eyes. In your leg? No. In your lack of trust in me, perhaps a little, but we hardly know each other yet despite our letters. Trust takes time. Amelia finally looked up, relief evident in her expression. You're very understanding, Thomas. I try to be. Now, would you like to see the inside of the general store? Mr. Hawkins stocks some surprisingly fine goods for such a small town. The next few days fell into a pleasant pattern. Thomas would arrive at the boarding house each morning, and they would spend the day together getting to know each other. He showed her his ranch, introducing her to his foreman, Miguel Vasquez, and the 2 ranch hands who helped run the operation. Amelia was impressed by the tidy house Thomas had built. It was simple but comfortable, with solid furniture and even a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes. You have quite the library for a rancher, she observed, running her fingers along the spines. Thomas smiled somewhat bashfully. Reading gets me through the winter evenings. Not much else to do when the snow's deep. It snows here. I thought California was warm. Up in these foothills we get our share of winter. Nothing like back east, but enough to make you grateful for a good fire. On the 5th day after her arrival, they were walking along the river that ran just outside of town when Thomas cleared his throat nervously. Amelia, I've been thinking. She turned to look at him, noticing the serious expression on his face. Yes. These past days have been the happiest I can remember in a long time. I know it hasn't been long, but I feel like I've known you for years. Your letters showed me your mind and heart, and now, meeting you in person. He stopped walking and turned to face her. I'd like to ask if you'd consider marrying me. Not right away if you're not ready, but yes, Amelia interrupted, her heart pounding. Yes, I'll marry you, Thomas. His face broke into a wide smile. You're sure? I know I'm just a simple rancher and my place isn't fancy. I'm very sure, she said firmly. You're the kindest man I've ever known. Your letters revealed a thoughtful, intelligent person, and meeting you has only confirmed that. Thomas reached for her hand, holding it gently. I can't offer you a life of luxury, but I promise you'll never want for anything I can provide. And I meant what I said when you arrived. I'll walk beside you, at whatever pace suits you, for all our days together. Tears pricked at Amelia's eyes. That's more than I ever hoped for. They were married 2 weeks later in the small white church in Oroville. The ceremony was simple, with only a few guests: the Flemings, Miguel and his wife Rosa, Thomas's ranch hands, and a few townsfolk who had welcomed Amelia kindly. Amelia wore a cream-colored dress that Mrs. Fleming had helped her alter, with tiny wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Thomas looked handsome in a new dark suit, his normally unruly hair tamed for the occasion. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and lanterns hanging from the trees. Miguel's wife had prepared a feast, and someone brought out a fiddle as the evening progressed. When it came time for the first dance, Amelia hesitated. "I'm not much of a dancer," she whispered to Thomas. "Neither am I," he replied with a smile. "We'll figure it out together." And so they did, moving slowly in a small circle, Thomas supporting her weight when needed, never rushing, never showing impatience. When she tired, they sat together and watched others dance, his hand holding hers on the table between them. Later that night, alone in the house that was now their home, they came together as husband and wife. Thomas was gentle and patient, and Amelia discovered a passion within herself she hadn't known existed. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt truly accepted for perhaps the first time in her life. "Are you happy?" Thomas asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "More than I ever thought possible," she answered truthfully. The seasons changed, and with them, Amelia and Thomas settled into married life. There were adjustments, as there are for any newly married couple. Amelia learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings, the physically demanding days, the satisfaction of work completed. Thomas learned to appreciate having someone to come home to, someone who made the house truly a home with small touches that reflected her personality. In late autumn, when the first snows threatened, Thomas rode into town for supplies. Amelia, left alone at the ranch, decided to bake bread and prepare a hearty stew for his return. As she worked in the kitchen, she heard a noise from outside. Thinking it was Thomas returning early, she went to the window, but instead of her husband, she saw 3 rough-looking men dismounting from their horses. Her heart raced as they approached the house. There was a loud knock, and then a voice called out, "Hello, the house. Anyone home?" Amelia hesitated. Thomas kept a rifle above the fireplace, but she had never fired a gun before. Deciding caution was best, she approached the door but didn't open it. "Yes." "Who's there?" "Madam, we're just travelers looking for a meal and maybe a place to rest our horses. Your husband around?" Something in the man's tone made Amelia wary. "My husband will be back any minute. He rode to town with our ranch hands." There was a pause, then a laugh. "Now, I don't think that's true, madam. We passed the trail to town and there wasn't nobody on it. Why don't you just open up and let us in? We won't cause no trouble." Amelia backed away from the door, her leg aching from tension. She moved to the fireplace and reached for the rifle, her hands trembling. The door suddenly burst open, the lock splintering as the largest of the 3 men kicked it in. Amelia raised the rifle, pointing it at them with shaking hands. "Get out of my house," she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. The leader of the trio grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Look at this, boys. A crippled woman thinks she can stop us with a gun she don't even know how to use." "I know how to pull a trigger," Amelia said, though in truth, she wasn't sure she could actually shoot another human being, even to defend herself. "Maybe so, but can you shoot all 3 of us before we get to you?" The man took a step forward. "Now, be reasonable. We just want whatever valuables you got and maybe some food. You cooperate and you won't get hurt." Amelia's finger tightened on the trigger as the men spread out, trying to surround her. Her leg throbbed painfully, and she knew she couldn't move quickly enough to keep them all in front of her. Just as the situation seemed most dire, a shot rang out not from Amelia's rifle, but from the doorway. The 3 intruders whirled around to find Miguel standing there, his pistol raised. "The next one goes between somebody's eyes," he said calmly. "Your choice who dies first." The leader of the trio raised his hands slowly. "Now, hold on. We were just, "I know what you were just doing," Miguel cut him off. "Get out, now. And if I see you within 50 miles of this ranch again, I won't waste time with warnings." The three men backed away, then hurried outside to their horses. Miguel kept his gun trained on them until they rode away, then turned to Amelia. "Are you all right, Mrs. Benson?" Amelia lowered the rifle, her arms shaking from the strain. "Yes, thanks to you. How did you know?" "I was checking the north pasture fence when I saw them ride in. Didn't recognize them, so I came to investigate." He looked at the broken door. "I'll fix that before Mr. Benson gets back." "Thank you, Miguel. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't arrived." "You were holding your own," he said with a respectful nod toward the rifle. "But maybe Mr. Benson should teach you to shoot properly, just in case." When Thomas returned and heard what had happened, his face paled. "I should never have left you alone." "You can't be with me every minute," Amelia reasoned. "But Miguel suggested I learn to shoot, and I think he's right." Thomas nodded grimly. "First thing tomorrow. And I'm hiring another hand, so someone will always be close to the house." True to his word, Thomas began teaching Amelia to handle firearms the next day. Though she initially found it difficult to manage the rifle's weight with her uneven stance, Thomas devised a way for her to brace herself that compensated for her weaker leg. "You're a natural," he said approvingly, as she hit the target he'd set up. "Just remember, only point it at something you're willing to destroy." "I hope I never have to use it against a person," Amelia said quietly. "So do I. But knowing you can protect yourself eases my mind when I can't be here." The incident with the would-be robbers brought them closer, intensifying their appreciation for each other. As winter settled over the ranch, they spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other from Thomas's books or simply talking about their hopes for the future. "I'd like children," Amelia said one night, somewhat hesitantly, "if you want them too." Thomas looked up from the harness he was mending. "I'd like nothing better. But are you concerned about your leg, with pregnancy and childbirth?" She nodded. "The doctor in Philadelphia said it might be difficult but not impossible. I'd need extra care." "Then we'll make sure you get it," Thomas said firmly. "When the time comes." That time came sooner than either expected. By spring, Amelia was certain she was with child. The town doctor confirmed it, estimating the baby would arrive in late autumn. "You'll need to be careful with that leg," he cautioned. "As you get bigger, it'll put more strain on your muscles. Don't hesitate to ask for help." Pregnancy was indeed challenging for Amelia. As her body changed, her balance became more precarious, and the added weight made her limp more pronounced. Thomas was attentive to a fault, often taking on household tasks he'd never done before to spare her the effort. "You don't have to treat me like I'm made of glass," she protested one day as he insisted on carrying a basket of laundry that she could have managed. "I know you're strong," he replied, "but you're carrying our child. Let me help where I can." She couldn't argue with the tenderness in his voice. Summer faded into autumn, and Amelia's time grew near. Thomas rarely left the ranch now, delegating tasks to Miguel and the other hands that would normally have required his attention. He'd arranged for the doctor to stay in town rather than continuing his usual circuit of surrounding communities. One crisp October morning, Amelia woke to the first pains of labor. "Thomas," she said, grasping his arm, "I think it's time." Thomas was instantly alert. He helped her dress, then hitched the wagon while Miguel rode for the doctor. The journey into town was slow and painful for Amelia, each bump in the road sending spasms through her already aching body. Mrs. Fleming had prepared a room for the birth, and the doctor was waiting when they arrived. Thomas carried Amelia upstairs, laying her gently on the bed. "I'll be right outside," he promised, kissing her forehead. The labor was long and difficult. Amelia's weakened leg complicated matters, making it harder for her to position herself as the doctor directed. Hours passed, and Thomas paced the hallway, flinching at every cry from behind the closed door. Finally, as evening approached, the distinctive wail of a newborn filled the air. Thomas froze, holding his breath until Mrs. Fleming opened the door, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Benson, a strong, healthy boy." Thomas entered the room to find Amelia propped up on pillows, her face exhausted but radiant as she cradled a small bundle against her chest. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Thomas approached the bed almost reverently. The baby was red-faced and wrinkled, with a shock of dark hair like his father's. "He's perfect," Thomas whispered, gently touching the tiny hand that emerged from the blanket. The infant reflexively grasped his finger, and Thomas felt his heart expand with a love he'd never experienced before. "What shall we call him?" Amelia asked. Thomas thought for a moment. "Daniel, after your brother, if you'd like." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. "Daniel Thomas Benson. It's perfect." They named Mrs. Fleming and Dr. Ellis as godparents at the christening 3 weeks later. The entire town seemed to turn out for the occasion, everyone eager to see the Benson baby. "He's got your eyes," Mrs. Miller from the general store told Amelia. "Such a beautiful shade of green." "But his father's stubborn chin," Amelia replied with a smile, glancing at Thomas, who was proudly showing off his son to Miguel and the ranch hands. Life with a newborn brought new challenges and joys. Amelia sometimes struggled to carry Daniel while managing her uneven gait, but Thomas was always there to help. He took to fatherhood naturally, seemingly undaunted by dirty diapers or middle-of-the-night crying sessions. "You're a wonderful father," Amelia told him one evening as she watched him gently rock Daniel to sleep. "He makes it easy," Thomas replied. "I look at him and see everything good in the world." As Daniel grew from infant to toddler, it became clear he had inherited his father's strong constitution and his mother's quick mind. By 18 months, he was running everywhere, keeping both parents constantly on their toes. "I can't keep up with him," Amelia admitted one day, watching as Daniel chased a butterfly across the yard. "Then we'll both go slow and let him run circles around us," Thomas said, taking her hand. "He'll come back when he's ready. They always do." The years passed, bringing changes to the ranch and the family. Thomas's careful management and hard work paid off, allowing them to expand their holdings and build a larger house. Amelia proved to be not only a loving wife and mother, but also an excellent bookkeeper, helping Thomas track expenses and profits with an accuracy that impressed even the bank manager in Oroville. When Daniel was 4, they welcomed a second child, a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose, after both their mothers. Unlike her brother, Lizzie, as they called her, was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with thoughtful eyes that gradually changed from newborn blue to her father's warm brown. "Two healthy children," Thomas marveled one evening as they sat on the porch, watching Daniel teach Lizzie how to build a tower with wooden blocks. "I never imagined being so blessed." Amelia squeezed his hand. "Nor I, especially after." She didn't need to finish the sentence. They both knew she was referring to the time before they met, when she believed no man would want her because of her limp. "I thank God every day you answered my advertisement," Thomas said, "even if you did leave out one small detail." His teasing smile took any sting from the words. "The best omission I ever made," Amelia replied. "It brought me to you." Their conversation was interrupted by Daniel's excited voice. "Pa, Ma, look how high I built it." They turned to see a tower of blocks that reached almost to the boy's shoulder. Lizzie clapped her small hands in delight. "That's wonderful, Daniel," Amelia praised. "You're becoming quite the architect." "What's an architect?" the boy asked, his brow furrowing. "Someone who designs buildings," Thomas explained, "like Mr. Henderson who drew the plans for our new house." Daniel considered this seriously. "I want to be an architect when I grow up and build houses for everyone in Oroville." "You can be anything you set your mind to," Thomas assured him, "just like your mother." Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Like me?" "Yes, like you." Who else would have the courage to travel across the country to marry a stranger? Or learn to shoot a rifle despite never handling a gun before? Or manage to keep the accounts for our ranch better than any bank clerk could? Amelia blushed at the praise. "I've had a good partner." "The best," Thomas agreed, leaning over to kiss her softly. "Ugh," Daniel groaned. "They're kissing again, Lizzie." The little girl giggled, a sound that never failed to make both parents smile. Life wasn't always easy. There were droughts that threatened the cattle, winters harsh enough to keep them housebound for weeks, and the normal challenges that face any family. When Daniel was 8 and Lizzie 4, a particularly virulent bout of influenza swept through Oroville. Both children fell ill, as did Amelia. Thomas worked tirelessly, tending to all three while still managing the ranch. The doctor came daily, his face growing increasingly concerned as Amelia's fever refused to break. "Her body is fighting hard," he told Thomas privately. "But her previous illness may have weakened her constitution more than we realized." Thomas refused to accept the possibility of losing her. "She's stronger than anyone I know," he insisted. "She'll pull through." For 3 days and nights, he barely slept, sponging Amelia's burning forehead with cool water and holding her hand as she drifted in and out of consciousness. The children began to recover, but Amelia remained desperately ill. On the 4th night, as Thomas dozed in a chair beside her bed, he was startled awake by her voice. "Thomas, water, please." He scrambled to help her drink, his hand shaking with relief as he held the glass to her lips. Her fever had broken, and though weak, her eyes were clear and focused. "The children?" she asked anxiously. "On the mend. Daniel's already asking for second helpings at dinner, and Lizzie's well enough to be bossing her dolls around again." Thomas couldn't keep the emotion from his voice. "You gave us quite a scare." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't mean to worry you. Don't apologize for being ill." Thomas stroked her hair gently. "Just focus on getting better. We need you, Amelia. I need you." Her recovery was slow. The illness had further weakened her left leg, making her limp more pronounced than before. For a time, she needed a cane to walk any distance. "I feel like I've gone backward," she confessed to Thomas one day, frustrated by her limited mobility. "You're alive," he said simply. "That's all that matters to me, and you're getting stronger every day." True to his word, Thomas walked beside her as she gradually regained her strength. By summer, she had discarded the cane, though she tired more easily than before. Life on the ranch continued, the rhythms of the seasons marking the passage of time. Daniel, now approaching his teenage years, took on more responsibilities, eager to learn everything about ranching from his father. Lizzie, with her mother's green eyes and thoughtful nature, showed an aptitude for books and numbers that suggested she might follow Amelia's path. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked Amelia one evening as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the hills in shades of gold and purple. The children were inside, Daniel helping Lizzie with her reading. "Regret what?" Amelia looked at him, puzzled. "Coming west. Marrying a man you'd never met. Living this life, so different from what you knew in Philadelphia." Amelia considered his question seriously, as she did all things. "I've never regretted it, not for a moment. This life with you, with our children, it's more than I ever dared hope for." Even with the hardships, The isolation sometimes. The fact that your leg might have gotten better care in a big city. She reached for his hand. Thomas Benson, are you fishing for compliments? He laughed, caught. Maybe a little. But I do wonder sometimes, especially on days when I see you struggling with pain. My leg would be the same wherever I lived, she said firmly. And yes, there have been hardships, but we've faced them together. That's what matters. She paused, then asked, do you regret answering my letter? Even though I wasn't entirely honest about my condition. Never, he said without hesitation. The moment I saw you step down from that stagecoach, I knew you were exactly who I'd been waiting for, limp and all. You were so kind that day, Amelia remembered. When you said you'd walk slow beside me always, I think I fell in love with you right then. Thomas smiled. I meant it, and I still do. As they grew older, their love deepened. They weathered the challenges of raising teenagers. Daniel's rebellious phase at 15 that nearly drove Thomas to distraction. Lizzie's tearful heartbreak when her first crush married someone else. Through it all, Thomas and Amelia presented a united front, their unwavering commitment to each other providing stability for their children. Daniel eventually took over much of the ranch management, allowing Thomas to ease back as age began to make the physical labor more difficult. At 20, he married Mary Carson, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, combining their properties and expanding the Benson holdings significantly. Lizzie, unlike her brother, yearned for education beyond what Oroville could provide. After much family discussion, she was sent to Sacramento for schooling, returning with knowledge of modern bookkeeping methods and business practices that helped transform the ranch into one of the most prosperous in the county. By the time Thomas and Amelia celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary, they were surrounded not only by their grown children, but also by 3 grandchildren, Daniel and Mary's twins, Thomas and Robert, and their daughter Sarah. The town of Oroville organized a celebration for the occasion, recognizing the Bensons as one of the founding families who had helped build the community. The festivities were held in the town square, with tables laden with food and a band playing dance music. May I have this dance, Mrs. Benson? Thomas asked formally, extending his hand to Amelia. I'm not sure my old leg is up to it, she demurred, though her eyes sparkled at the invitation. Then we'll do what we've always done, he replied. Go slow and steady together. And so they did, moving carefully across the dance floor, Thomas supporting her as he had from the very beginning. They were no longer young. Thomas's hair had turned silver, and Amelia's chestnut locks were streaked with gray, but the look that passed between them was as tender as it had been on their wedding day. 25 years, Amelia marveled as they swayed gently to the music. It seems both a lifetime and the blink of an eye. The best 25 years any man could ask for, Thomas agreed. And I hope for 25 more at least. From the edge of the dance floor, Daniel watched his parents with a smile. They still look at each other like newlyweds, he commented to his wife. Mary nodded. It's rare, that kind of love. Your father is a special man. So is my mother, Daniel said. Do you know, she once shot a rattlesnake that was about to strike me when I was 7. Never even flinched, despite how hard it was for her to balance with that rifle. They've both always been so much stronger than they appear. As the evening wound down, Thomas and Amelia found themselves surrounded by well-wishers offering congratulations and reminiscences. Sheriff Jenkins, now retired but still spry at 70, reminded everyone of how Thomas had once tracked down cattle rustlers during the harsh winter of '84. Mrs. Fleming, now in her 80s and using an ear trumpet, delighted in recounting how she'd helped prepare Amelia for her wedding day. I knew you two would make it, she declared loudly. Not everyone does, you know, takes work and patience. And love, Amelia added softly. Above all, love. Later that night, back at the ranch that had been their home for a quarter-century, Thomas helped Amelia onto the porch swing he'd built for her 50th birthday. "Happy anniversary, my love," he said, settling beside her and draping a blanket across their laps against the evening chill. "Happy anniversary." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me the day I arrived in Oroville? 'I'll walk slow beside you always,'" Thomas quoted without hesitation. "And you have," Amelia said. "In all these years, you've never once run ahead or left me behind." "Nor will I ever," he promised, taking her hand in his. "We'll finish this journey exactly as we started it together, at whatever pace suits us both." As twilight deepened into night, they sat in companionable silence, listening to the familiar sounds of their ranch cattle lowing in the distant pasture, the soft whicker of horses in the barn, the creak of the windmill turning in the gentle breeze. It wasn't the life either of them had imagined in their youth, but it was a life built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and a love that had only grown stronger with each passing year. "I was so afraid when I stepped off that stagecoach," Amelia admitted. "Afraid you'd see my limp and send me right back east." "I was afraid too," Thomas confessed. "Afraid you'd take one look at this rough rancher and his humble home and decide you'd made a terrible mistake." "We were both wrong to worry," Amelia said with a smile. "It seems our fears were groundless." "Not groundless," Thomas corrected gently, "just overcome by something stronger." As stars appeared in the clear California sky, Thomas and Amelia Benson continued their slow, steady journey together, just as they had since that fateful day in 1876, when a mail-order bride with a limp had arrived in Oroville, and a kind-hearted cowboy had promised to walk slowly beside her, always.